Hello, my lovely listeners. It's so great to be with you again for the latest episode of Get on the Grid with Chessie Roberts, and my guest this time is Roberta Grimes. She's been on the show before, and I'm just thrilled that she's back again. She has a new book, and that's what we're going to talk about. But before we get started, Roberta and I would like for you to join us in aligning with the energies of co-creation so that this show gives you the best information to your highest good and best outcome. Welcome, Roberta. It's so nice to have you back on the show.
Oh, I'm delighted to be with you, Chessie. We always have so much fun.
Yes, we do. For those of you who may not be familiar with Roberta, she spent decades studying nearly 200 years of afterlife evidence and forming a detailed picture of what happens at and after death. She then discovered that 2,000 years ago, Jesus told us things about God, reality, death, the afterlife, human nature, and the meaning and purpose of our lives that perfectly match the afterlife evidence, even in small details. She outlines many of these correspondences in the appendix book, The Fun of Dying and the Fun of Staying in Touch. And this new book is called Liberating Jesus. And I have a copy in my hand, and I've got to tell you, it's a fascinating read. Roberta, how did you come about writing this particular book?
Well, even 5, 6, 7 years ago, I had put it all together. The most astonishing discovery of my life, and I think of maybe the century, is that after 2 translations, Jesus spoke Aramaic, and then that was translated into Greek, and the Greek into modern languages. After the fact that nothing was even written down that he had said for 2 generations, and they started writing it down in Aramaic, translated to Greek, translated to English. When we take the words of Jesus in the Gospels on love, forgiveness, and the meaning and purpose of life, and the nature of God, and the nature of reality, and all of these things, we take what he said, it perfectly matches what we are only learning in the 20th and 21st centuries about the same topics: God, reality, death, the afterlife, and the meaning of human life. I mean, those who do afterlife research intensively find that it's a whole new science. It tells us about all that stuff, not just about where we go at death. But Jesus told us all the same things 2,000 years ago? How is that even possible?
Well, how did we get it so muddled up, us just trying to understand, as my ex-husband used to say, to see through the wool? Or did
right.
humanity just decide to make stuff up? Or what happened?
Well, here's the problem. Jesus is a genuine, eternal being. Jesus is literally an aspect of God. I think we can demonstrate that now. Not just the Son of God, but actually God come to earth to try to understand how we were screwing up so badly and then begin to tell us how to fix it. And that's, of course, the teachings in the Gospels. So this was a phenomenon that may never have happened in all of human history, but happened once to the Jews 2,000 years ago. We're talking Iron Age people, very superstitious, totally clueless. They had no idea what was happening to them. So then
I have to interrupt you right here because Jesus is one of my ascended masters that I meditate with and speak to all the time, and he told me the exact same thing when I asked him that question. So I love
that he's helping you, because I'm going to tell you his part in the writing of this book, but I want to give people a background in this. I mean, by the time that I wrote The Fun of Dying, and that was in 2009, I knew enough about all this stuff to do an appendix there, which shows the astonishing ways in which Jesus confirms what the dead are telling us and what the science tells us, which is amazing. I should just say, by way of my own background, that I had 2 experiences of light in childhood that made me a tremendous Christian. I've read the Bible cover to cover repeatedly. I used to say 12 times. I think it's more like 6 for all of it and 12 for the New Testament. I majored in religion, specializing in early Christian history at Smith, for heaven's sake. I went to a fancy school and majored in early Christian history. I mean, I'm as big a Christian, or was, as you can imagine. So I was initially troubled to find that the things that we were learning from the dead really contradict Christianity in major ways. So I asked myself that question too. And if you look at what actually happened, when it happened, and how you come to understand why. Jesus doesn't create Christianity, the religion, in the Gospels. In fact, he talks against trying to make a religion out of what he taught. He wanted it to be a philosophy right from day one. But then he was killed, and in a horrible way, and he was our Messiah. And how do we make sense of this? Well, if we're a first century Jew, where we're still sacrificing birds and little animals in the temple, all we can think is, oh, this is our final sacrifice, has been delivered to us and sacrificed back to God, so we don't have to sacrifice little birds anymore, and we're no longer guilty of what Adam did, in ancient prehistory, and everything is great as long as we've got the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. It made sense to them. Why is there a single person on the face of the earth in the 21st century to whom that makes any sense at all? That's not a loving God. That's an appalling God. And that God doesn't exist. There's no evidence whatsoever, and I've looked hard for it, that the death of Jesus on the cross redeemed us or needed to, because there's also no evidence that God ever judges us or any religious figure. And actually, a lot of these things Jesus tells us, we just ignore them. Jesus says in the Gospels, God does not judge you, for he has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son as they honor the Father. Then flip a few more pages, and he says, as for me, I don't judge anyone who doesn't follow my teachings. I didn't come to judge the world. I came to save it. And he did. He did come to save it. He came to save it from ignorance, not from God. We don't need saving from God. Our minds are part of God. We are as close to God as it is possible to be once we come to understand what God actually is. And again, Jesus told us that. God is spirit. We have to worship in spirit and in truth. Chessie, it's amazing that people don't realize this stuff.
Well, I can remember when I was back doing the Sunday school thing as a child, I used to ask questions that are very similar to a lot of points you bring up in the book. And I was chastised horribly either by the teacher or the minister or priest or whoever was in charge. And I was actually told as an adult to leave the church and come back when I could control myself, because the question had arisen in the Sunday school class. I was actually visiting with my uncle's church family, and we walked into the adult class, and they were discussing whether Jesus went to hell after he died on the cross. And following the teachings that I had had at the time, I thought, well, if he didn't go to hell, why was he killed? What was the point of that? So I hadn't said anything, and the minister turned to me because he was teaching the class, and he says, let's ask our visitor. And I'm thinking, ooh.
Oh, no.
But I answered truthfully. I said, well, if he didn't go to hell to redeem us, what was the point of the exercise of him being crucified in the first place? This was met by gasps from both sides of the argument, and I was told by my uncle later that the minister had asked him, please not to let me come back to church.
Isn't that sad?
That's when I really started wondering, okay, what is going on here? Because it hadn't made a whole lot of sense to me, this response to these questions I was asking as a child. You know, the old joke, you ask the question, can God create something too heavy for him to lift, sort of a thing. And so I was asking these questions, and it was making the teachers in the church very uncomfortable. And what made me step back and say, well, what's the issue here? Either it is or it isn't, and it's not.
Yes. The thing is, most people, the Bible is the greatest book never read. Most people have not sat down and actually read the Bible, each of the books. I've done it repeatedly, and I can swear to you, this book on which they base the teachings, base the dogmas of Christianity, is not the inspired Word of God. And we know that because God is sane, loving, rational, consistent, and the Bible's none of that. The Old Testament is not the inspired Word of God, and I don't believe it ever was. What?
For transparency here, I will have to admit that I have not read the entire Bible.
Nobody has.
I have tried.
Nobody has.
My grandfather did, and he believed every word he read. But I've tried on several occasions, but after a while my head feels like it's going to explode because of the contradictions that I run into. So
the problem is full. Internally,
it's
the Old
a breath
Testament,
of fresh air.
Yes. It's internally the Old Testament is contradictory, and frankly, it's appalling. Nobody follows it. In order to follow it, you would have to do some things that are just unacceptable, including never cutting your beard, or if you have one, we are fortunate not to have to bother with that. But not wearing blended clothing. I mean, it's all ridiculous. Killing people who violate the Sabbath.
Well, now let me ask you this. Doesn't the Torah follow the Old Testament? Isn't that the Jewish part of things?
Yes. Jesus came to enlighten the Jews. He said he came to the Jews. The Jews were the first true monotheists. And what he came to do was to explain to him what this one God, all-powerful, actually is. And that's what's in the Gospels. But he says right in the Gospels, I've come to replace the Old Testament. And you have to, it's easy to sort of find the spots where he says it. Someone said to him one day, and backing up a step, you've got to remember that for the whole time he was teaching, he had a death sentence on his head. It was a crime punishable by death to speak against the prevailing religion, and there always were temple guards there watching and listening. So he had a variety of ways to get around that and live a little longer, and one of the things he did was to tell big truths in pieces. If you read the whole of the Gospels, you can see those spots, and they're really, here's an example. They're really, really brilliant. Someone said to him one day, well, aren't you just replacing the law and the prophets? That's what they call the Old Testament.
Right.
The law being the Torah and the prophets being the other books. And Jesus said, I did not come to abolish the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill them. What did he mean? Well, different day, different guards. Someone said, teacher, what is the greatest commandment? Assuming one of the 10 is going to be brought up. Well, he doesn't mention any of the 10. He says, the greatest commandment is you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then he says the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Then he says a very important sentence. He says, in that consists the whole law and the prophets. So he has come to replace it with God's law of love. His great revelation 2,000 years ago was God's law of love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. All those other rules that are in the Old Testament are replaced. And he even says in another place, actually, that the Golden Rule replaces the law and the prophets. Do to others as you would have them do to you. But that's it.
You know, it's funny because, again, when I ask about this to the Ascended Masters, what do we need to do to create heaven here on earth? And they told me, forgive and love yourself. Love others, and that's it. And I said, is that all? And they said, yeah. And I thought, well, wow, that's so simple. Why don't we know that? It's because we don't read it. And as you were reading those scripture verses, when I was in Sunday school, we had to remember them. We had to be able to spout them out back to the teacher, but they didn't add that last sentence.
Yes, they don't. But it's there. It's just like one of the most famous lines from the Gospels is, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And the Christians spout that. You know, here is the truth. We're giving it to you. The truth will set you free. But the whole quotation, John 8:31-32, and it's on the cover of Liberating Jesus, is, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Well, that changes it a little, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah. But the problem we have as Christians is that Paul's dogmas are and the whole of the Old Testament, in other words, the rest of the New and all of the Old, are treated as equal to the Gospels. So what we've done is to take the greatest teachings ever given to humankind, and they are the way for us to bring the kingdom of God on earth, which is what we're here to do. The greatest teachings are mushed up with a lot of stuff that doesn't relate to them, that Jesus, would not, he disavowed the Old Testament. He never read the New. He died, and then it was written. But he disavows it all. I mean, he says right in the Gospels not to mix up what he is teaching with Judaism. Here's one of the, I'll quote it from memory. There's a parable where he says, don't put new wine into old wineskins, because if you do, the skins will split and the wine will be spoiled and everything will be ruined. Instead, you put new wine into new wineskins. What he's saying there is throw away the old religion. Follow this philosophy. That's all you need. But
Can
of course,
you
that's
turn your
not
mic just a little bit? You're fading out there. I don't want anybody to miss anything.
Oh, okay. Is this better?
That's better. Yes.
I think I get deep into what I'm saying, and I sort of say it more softly. But you see what the problem is? If you read the Gospels apart from the rest of the Bible, you see that he meant something very different from the Christianity that we now have. And had we followed his teachings, we would now be infinitely better off. We would have the kingdom of God on earth. In fact, I've had that promise made to me that and it doesn't even need to be more than 10 or 20% of the people in the world. When that many people are sincerely following the teachings of Jesus, we will have the kingdom on earth. You don't need to go and fight the enemy and have no more enemies.
Well,
and the reason that works is, people are saying, well, she's being silly. The reason it works is because our minds are all part of the mind of God. Our minds are intimately connected. So you cannot, if you want to change the world, all you can do is change yourself. And when enough of us have changed ourselves, the world must change.
That makes perfect sense to me. My question is, with all the New Age stuff coming out, and I'm not saying that as derogatorily as it may sound, I just don't have a better word to describe what's happening, with people waking up and becoming aware, it seems that a lot of this new awakening, this new awareness, has to do with exactly what you're talking about. And some of it seems to be rather far afield. Do you think that this far afield stuff is obfuscating the truth yet again, or is
yes,
it just
it
a
is.
way to look at it? Okay.
No, I get a lot of emails from people because I invite them and I always answer them. I always say, if you don't hear in 24 hours, send flowers. I answer. There are times when I do nothing but answer emails all day. Many people are asking the same kind of question. What about this? What about that? I've been following this other teaching. What about aliens? What if, and soul readings and all of this. There is a simple truth, and that truth is that we are here to raise our own spiritual vibration. That's why we're here. That's why the earth exists. I think that's why the universe exists, in which, by the way, are many planets where people are doing the same thing. But we're not here to sort of figure out how to game the system or try to better understand what the place is constructed of. We're just here to learn. This is kindergarten, and we're here to learn. So I don't follow or read any New Age stuff. The only thing that I do is to read original sources on afterlife evidence, or some of there are really some wonderful people who put a lot of it together, and I recommend their works too and read them. and I read the Bible. That's it. In fact, now I only read the red letters. In fact, I don't even read all the red letters now, because Jesus says in Liberating Jesus how to tell what he said and what they added later. There was a lot added later.
Well, that's good news to have right there. I want our listeners to understand that in the book, when she quotes something out of the Bible, she does give chapter and verse so that you can go check it out for yourself. Nothing that she says is just out of the ethers. She's got scriptures to back it up, which I found absolutely fascinating. And it's amazing.
But I didn't write that part. I didn't write that at all. I didn't write it. I haven't changed it. I didn't write the parts of Liberating Jesus. This has been a very humbling 12 months for me because in February of 2015, my really exasperated primary guide broke into my life and told me that I was here to write this book, and I had to do it for him as well as for myself and for the master. So it was easy to channel my guide, but within 2 weeks we had really only well begun, and he let me know through the medium with whom we communicate that I was about to channel the Master, and I did for 2 weeks. I channeled the Master. I mean, I accept that now. It took me a while to even be able to think those words, never mind say it aloud. But this isn't...
I understand that.
Some people are saying, you said this, you did that. I didn't say it.
Well, let me rephrase then. In her book, the references have been channeled and written down so that these things are backed up by what they're talking about. Nothing has actually, everything's come through the ethers, but it's come through on the proper channel. How's that?
Yeah. I didn't believe it, Chessie. I after it was over and that energy was gone, it was such a letdown. I emailed my friend of the medium who has helped to make this possible. Her name is Suzanne Wilson, and she's terrific. I emailed her and said, I don't believe any of that happened. I'm not going to publish this book. And she said, funny you should say that, because the Unity, which is the group around Jesus, or what she calls them, have just asked to vet your book. Will you please send it? So she spent 3 or 4 days going over it with a sort of all-star list of she sent me the list. It was astonishing, including Jesus, of course, but also others. She sent me back 3 small formatting changes, which actually were good ideas. I said, great, now where's the substantive change? And she said, they don't want you to change a word. They want you to know the Master says, well done, good and faithful servant. So then I cried, but I cried partly because I didn't have a choice. I had to publish it. And I've since made my peace with that, but it's very hard to say to an entrenched belief system, you're on the wrong track. Jesus isn't with you. Get back on the Lord's track as soon as you can. It's hard to say that, although
I can't imagine why.
But just as you said, dear, there are so many people who are saying, I always thought this, or why didn't he say it sooner? So many people already have they've just needed permission to think things which are really obvious thoughts for all of us. We know there's something wrong. I knew it, but I didn't want it to be about Jesus. Well, it isn't. It's about everything else in the religion.
Well, I've got to interject here that as I have grown through the years and have studied my spiritual path and looked under this rock and that leaf and all of that sort of thing, I've discovered that a lot of what I was taught as a child and a young adult is wrong. I don't see why this should be any different.
Right.
And as we uncover the truth of what really is, and all of that wrongness, that unsubstantive information falls away, and we start to see the real truth of the matter, no matter what it is, whether it's the math we're doing or the books we're reading or the belief system that we have. Don't you find, and I know you've gone through this yourself, don't you find that things become clearer and lighter and brighter and stressful?
Yeah. Yes, clarity is a marvelous thing, and it makes sense. When finally, at a deep level in your heart makes sense, it does transform your life right there. And because I had already learned about the collaborations or corroborations rather between the teachings of Jesus and what the dead tell us, and I put it in The Fun of Dying way back when I started touring, late 2010 or early 2011, someone raised their hand in the back of the room and said, does it work? And I said, does what work? And he said, the teachings, do they work? So I said, of course they do. But then afterward I thought, I'd better figure it out. So I began then, and just almost 5 years ago now, to live the teachings of Jesus, literally. It was a commitment that I was nervous about, because what if you screw it up, and how could this possibly work? And I had to learn some things about the order in which things had to be done and how to apply it and what the tricks are, and I'm sure there are a lot more, but I found quite a few. Chessie, within 3 months, my life was altogether different. I was seeing different. I was different on the inside, and that has continued. It is amazing how easy it is to follow those teachings, and if we do it sincerely, it is astonishing how it transforms our lives for the better.
Wow.
I mean, you wouldn't have liked me before. Trust me, I was not very nice 6 years ago, but I'm kind of much nicer now.
Well, I have discovered that is true as we go through these things and start to embrace these truths. We do change, and we don't just change on the surface. We change deeper than we know we have room to do it.
Yes.
And as that becomes your go-to point rather than what you were doing before, the changes do cascade out, and people start to look at you differently. And I've still got some people looking at me like I've gone green or something, but that's all right.
Yeah.
I know where I'm supposed to be, and they'll figure it out or they won't. That's not my job. And that sounds a little callous and selfish, and I don't mean it that way, but I have learned that we have to take care of ourselves first. And
the only one you can change is yourself. That's the only person you can control. That's right.
Absolutely. And once you get a handle on who and what you are, then the other stuff seems to kind of fall into place. And that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but it's the easiest explanation I can come up with.
I think it's very freeing when you understand you do have the power to change yourself, and it's freeing to realize that when you do that, you're doing everything you possibly can to fix the world. Now, some of us came in with it, and we had chosen to offer ourselves to do more, and you and I are two such people. But it doesn't have to. You don't have to do more than to strictly follow those teachings. Incidentally, I found someone else. His name is T.J. Woodward. And he wrote a book called Conscious Being, which is very much like the teachings of Jesus, but it's based in Eastern religions. I just love his book. I recommend it to people. But so it doesn't have to be, and Jesus says right in the Gospels, it doesn't have to be exactly what he says, but we are here to transform ourselves, and that's how we do it. We follow a teaching that will help us do that. Don't have to meditate. You don't have to do yoga. None of the stuff I don't ever want to try to do you have to do. You just live your life in the right way, treating the things that happen in your life as exercises in better growing spiritually. That's all. But you know why it works so well? I didn't realize this till recently, because we're not learning anything new. We're forgetting what's wrong. And when we forget the wrong stuff, what's left is our truer nature, which is perfect love and forgiveness. Remember, we're part of God's mind. God is perfect love. So all we have to do is get back to what we already know.
I've said that for years. Just remember what you already know, and people look at me oddly, but
you're right, dear. You're totally right.
And I'm going to jump in here with the meditation. I know that we don't have to, but I find it extremely conducive to hearing from the masters.
Many people do those things. It's just that I want people to know you don't have to. You can just do what feels right to you.
Well, if I don't feel as connected as I want to, and I think that's just my biology acting up.
Yeah.
When I don't feel connected, I have a tendency to make wrong decisions, I think. And I start looking at the past, looking at the future, and that's not where you want to be. You want to be right here in this moment, doing whatever it is you're supposed to be doing in this moment. And as long as I can adhere to that, I feel like I'm connected, I'm in tune, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think probably that's part of it, yeah?
Totally. Yeah, it is. For you, that is the right connection. It does surprise and really delight me to see that each of us, of course, has a primary guide, and usually others as well. And they're working with us to lead us in the right direction and to help us know to do the things that are going to work best for us. I love that.
I always used to say back a long time ago, lead me not into temptation, for I can find it myself.
Quite on my own. Exactly right. That's right.
But if I don't feel like one of them's got me by the hand, and they do, I know there's a lot of face palm and a lot of eye rolling going on over there, just because I'm a stubborn person. But when they have me by the hand, my days go very well, and my path seems a little brighter, and I know I'm in connection with where I'm supposed to be. And the other thing about this is for one person, may or may not work for another person, but you come at the same thing from a different direction, and as long as you're headed in the right direction, it'll work, yeah?
Yes, yes. Yeah, Jesus himself said to one of his disciples he said, this guy's casting out demons, but he's not doing it our way. He's not one of us. We're trying to get him to stop. He won't. Jesus said, don't ask him to stop, for whoever is not against us is with us.
Huh.
True.
Well, that's almost a political statement, isn't it?
It is. He's a political guy. In the end, he was radical in his day, but he was right. 2,000 years later, he's righter than he ever was.
Mm-hmm. Wonder how he'd fare in this climate these days.
Well, one of the things I've asked some people who were resistant to this was, okay, he literally means liberating Jesus. And I didn't write it. He means it to be his new revelation. He was saying that in my mind as he was writing the book. And I was shrinking smaller, but I couldn't stop typing because he was doing the typing. And it is. This is the fact that the afterlife evidence and the teachings of Jesus on love, forgiveness, and the meaning of our lives and what God's like and so on are so perfectly consistent is impossible if it is not a genuine, true revelation from God. We didn't take it seriously the first time, and for the reason that Jesus mentioned to you, which is that people, they weren't ready for it. They didn't understand what they had. So it didn't work 2,000 years ago. He tried again, and he confirms in Liberating Jesus that he led the group that did A Course in Miracles. I think we've all suspected that, but they called themselves J because it was a collective. But that went right over our heads. Most people just can't, they're not able to do it, or they don't stick with it long enough. So basically he had two misses. So what they then apparently decided to do was to groom somebody. According to my guide, Jesus decided he was going to make his new revelation in a book. Thomas volunteered me to write the book. They didn't know if I could channel, though, but apparently I was the kind of person they were looking for. He had been programming me to write his book, which was going to be on a similar topic, so he had me hit all the marks, like reading the Bible and studying college and stuff. So they had me do a practice book, which is now reissued after almost 25 years. It's called My Thomas, and it is the only, how can I put this? It's actually a memoir. It's the only memoir written by Thomas Jefferson of his life during the Revolutionary War, which was also his beautiful marriage. He had the best love story. He lived the best love story in human history. And
you seem to be moving
died.
from the mic again, and like I said, I don't want anybody to miss anything.
Okay, that's better.
Yes.
I think I'm sort of hoarse this morning. I think I don't want to sound hoarse.
Oh, well,
okay,
don't worry about that. You're doing great. Just stay close to the mic, and we'll hear you fine.
Thank you, darling. So once My Thomas was written, and I think it's fantastic. I mean, I realize now I feel stupid. I never could have written it. The original version was even in Elizabethan English, for heaven's sake. I couldn't have written it. But I thought at the time, wow, am I smart? Look what I did. But anyway, once they proved I could channel, apparently 20-some years ago, they sent me on a course to write this book. That's everything I've ever written has been channeled, Chessie. And now coming to realize I can't write a word without my team, which is liberating in a way. Yes, that's true.
I know the feeling well. As you're talking, it occurs to me that this happens in everyone's life if you're paying attention, especially once you reach a point and you look back and you see how the markers have brought you to this point.
Yes.
It's happened to me on several different levels, and it's one of those things that I didn't see at the time. It's that living in the fishbowl. You don't know you're in the fishbowl till you get out of it and look back and go, oh, fishbowl. But
yes.
it happened to me when I was, for instance, when I was getting my Reiki attunements and became a Reiki master. During the attunement, I saw all kinds of weird things and colors and shapes and all that. And then when I went to a retreat at an ashram, it all came together. And it occurred to me as it was coming together, oh, that's why they showed me that. Oh, that's why I know this.
Isn't that interesting?
And so I have a whole new healing medium that's much like Reiki, but it's different because it's, I don't know exactly how to say this. It was hammered into me while I was at the ashram. And so all these little pointers that I had seen along the way were setting me up to do this. And I find that absolutely fascinating, and it's good to know that it happens to other people, too, because I think
it happens
it's the
to
first
everybody.
time I've ever said it out loud.
Well, but it's, I feel validated, too, by the fact that you've had the same experience. Every significant event in my life was decided in advance by my spirit guide, who had in his next to last lifetime been Thomas Jefferson, and he had in that lifetime written a version of Liberating Jesus and not published it because it was so radical. Back then, we're talking, early 1800s, but he wanted it written now. So as part of this elevation of the consciousness of the planet that really got into high gear about 70 years ago, I came in with him looking over my shoulder and guiding me to hit all the marks I had to. So one day I would write this book. And then, as I say, apparently it was all, the stakes were upped for him when he volunteered me to write Jesus' book, and I was accepted to do that. So then he's guiding me even better. And so I do the fun of dying, the fun of staying in touch. I'm speaking. I'm doing all these things. I'm thinking, this is great. I'm an afterlife educator. I love it. So then apparently he started trying, because we're guided at night, as you know. Those of us who are not as psychic are guided while we sleep. While our bodies sleep, we meet with our guides. So he said it one day, now it's time to write your book about Jesus. And I said, no way, Jose. I am not writing that book. I won't write that book. No. And I stamped my feet, apparently. I have no idea.
Right. Tell him never and see where it gets you.
Yes. So he literally broke into, he made me want a reading with Suzanne, with my mother, who had died a couple of years earlier, and then he broke into that reading, announced who he was, and said that I had work I had to do. And, of course, then I was willing to do it, but I thought I was just writing his book. He didn't inform me. I'm on a need-to-know basis with him because he knows that I'm just a silly female and I'll blab whatever he says, so he tries not to tell me anything if he can get away with it. But anyway, that's the way it is. I mean, it feels, I'm used to it now. Now I understand why I've always been so interested in Thomas Jefferson in particular.
Yeah.
And now I understand why I've been so obsessed with Jesus. This was all planned.
As you're speaking, I'm reminded of something that I saw in a Wayne Dyer film called The Shift, and he talks about the fact that when we are in utero, we don't have a care in the world. Everything is taken care of for us. Everything's done for us. And it's true, it is. And then when we pop out, the people around us tell God and the angels and whoever's there, okay, you did a good job, now we'll take over. And that's where our trip-up happens, because we're taught from then that we have to drive the bus, and we don't. When we can sit back and allow guidance or allow universe or allow God or whatever it is you want to call it to take over, and we can just surrender to what we're supposed to be doing, that's when all the other stuff just falls away, and we stop being worried, and we stop being obsessed, and we stop being stressed, and we stop being a lot of things that we think we have to be to get ahead in life, and just let it happen.
But Jesus says the last will be first, and that's the case. All the success, all the money, everything that we think we are getting ahead with in this lifetime is dross, because once we graduate to the next level, and we all will, the last really are first. The people who have put spiritual growth first and maybe eaten beans all their lives are living in palaces eternally. That's true. That's not just claptrap from some religion. That's what they tell us actually does happen. The higher you can go spiritually, the happier, the more joyous your life is, because we can only go as high in the afterlife levels as our spiritual development will allow. It's unbearable to go higher. So you can ace this lifetime, but the only way to do it is to strictly follow the teachings of Jesus or the teachings of other masters who say the same things, and really follow them, not optionally. You don't just love your family. You love the axe murderer too, and you love him because he is a part of the eternal God of which we all are a part.
I've had several people tell me on air and personally that there's no such thing as conditional love because we're human beings. We want revenge. We want comeuppance. We want get back at you-ness. But I have found that since I have embraced this unconditional love thing, I don't know that I hate anybody. I may not like what they have done,
right.
But when I do my affirmations and my prayers at the end of the day, I can honestly send love to every person, place, and thing on the planet with a clear conscience. I don't feel any anger or resentment towards anybody. Now, if I dwelt on what they were doing, I probably would, but it isn't their actions that I'm in love with. It's their spirit that I know is as clean as it needs to be, even though it's warped a little by whatever's going on around them. Is that a right way to say that?
What I found was that the only way I could learn love to the degree that we're meant to learn to love was I had to do two things. First, I had to learn to do radical forgiveness, and there are techniques for that work. And what it amounts to is a process that allows you to forgive before anything has happened. Because the alternative is each time something bugs you, you've got to notice it, feel bad about it, tamp down feeling bad, and forgive. And that's just too much work. I mean, it's much better if you don't allow anything ever to upset you to begin with. Then you really are forgiving universally. Right. The other thing I had to do, sadly, was to stop attending Christian churches. My husband and I are Catholic, and I was going, even when I stopped sort of doing the rest of it, I went to Mass to keep him comfortable and happy, as you do when you're married 43 years. But there above the altar was that life-size, full-color plaster Jesus bleeding on a cross. And that's true of many Catholic churches to this day, that they show this horrible murder occurring during real time in the church. And I found that so upsetting that I had to stop attending church. It made me fearful. Love of God is the first step in spiritual growth, the very first step, and you cannot love what you fear. Fear and love are opposites. Hatred is not. The opposite of love, fear is. And so I had to get over fearing God, and the only way to do that was to stop seeing the interior of that church. Sad to say.
My big challenge on that line was to realize that I am part of God. That seemed so blasphemous to me when I first started embracing it. And I had a little push-me-pull-you conversation every day about that. But once I started connecting to my guidance on a higher level than I had been before, excuse me, it was so obvious to me that that's how this works. That's what we are. And we are that spirit. We are created from that spirit. It couldn't be any other way. We aren't here by chance.
Yes. Yes. I think what's wonderful about this time is that so many people have been working all their lives toward this elevation of the consciousness of the planet. Everybody listening, everybody on Earth will have a different, slightly different approach to how to learn what needs to be learned in order for us all to make that shift. But the resources are all coming into place now, and I think it's astonishing and wonderful to just, have a little. It's as if each of us has this gigantic tapestry that's being put together at the highest levels of reality, and each of us has one stitch to put into that tapestry. But the trick is just to make your stitch a perfect stitch, and everybody else does the same, and there it's done.
Well, one of the things that I like about what's going on now is we can actually talk about it. Like you have said many times during this conversation, you were reticent to say anything out loud. You were not comfortable with the information you were getting because of how you may be perceived. And that's true of a lot of people, I think. we have these wonderful insights and these beautiful awakening events in our lives, but we won't talk about them because we're afraid to be taken as radical or out there or lunatics or something along those lines. But as other people around us are beginning to awaken, we can actually talk about these things in public without fear of ridicule or being slammed or anything. And I find that liberating.
Yes, and it's happened fast.
It has.
It
has indeed.
5 years ago, when I first published The Fun of Dying, I would be speaking before groups. I spoke before a lot of Unity churches and in bookstores and, IAN's meetings. And I would be speaking about basic stuff, and I'd be looking out over a sea of blank faces in confusion. And they would ask questions that were really pretty clueless or something I had just answered. Uh-huh. And that was 2011. By 2013, there was a different day, different people, nothing to do with me, but the groups that I was speaking to, there'd be a lot of nodding, smiling, and questions would be very, very good, perceptive questions. So something happened toward the end of 2012. I don't think it had anything to do with the Mayans, but I do think that there was a major shift in our understanding in Western cultures about what really is going on. And it continues to build. I
can absolutely agree with that.
I mean, it's a wonderful time to be alive.
I was saying to somebody not long ago that I'm so thankful that I'm here at this transitional period.
Yeah.
And that I get to transition through all of this stuff and learn everything. And I won't say everything because I'm still here on the planet, so I'm still learning. But
right.
But I think it's a wonderful time to be here because the connections are so remarkable and high vibrational and expanded knowledge and all of that sort of thing. And she's nodding to me, and when I finish speaking, she says, well, you planned it that way. This is why you're here now. This is what you chose. And I thought, well, duh, yeah.
There's a whole group of people who came in the 40s, 50s, 60s, some in the 70s, but there's a great, if you look around at the people who are doing this work most seriously, most of us are right that age. I was born 1 year, almost to the day, after they exploded the bombs in Japan, and clearly directly came in to try to change things. They've been working for 70 years to retard our weapons development while they jumpstart our spiritual development, and that's what we are. What you and I and so many others are. We're little foot soldiers in this great war of peace.
Well, one of the things that has occurred to me since I've started doing this radio show is that a lot of times, and I've said it on the air many, many times, that as a child I was so unaware. I just went blithely on with my life, and I was completely unaware. And one day it occurred to me that that was incorrect. It wasn't that I was unaware. It was that I was that tuned in to what I was supposed to be doing. And that was a life-changing revelation.
You don't have to examine it because you're living it. That's right.
Right.
So,
as a young adult, now that's when I decided that I didn't need to be taken care of. I could handle everything on my own. And I went the heavy Christian path. And that's where I kind of got my trip up as well, because things stopped making sense and I didn't understand, and I was feeling rather led by the nose, so to speak. And once again, as I let go of what I was seeing as a truth because somebody told me it was, and started reverting back to that innocent belief that there was something higher than me and that I could follow that, and it was leading me anyway, that's when everything started to change again. And it was really funny because when I realized that as a child I hadn't been brain dead, so to speak, or unaware, let's use that, that's better, and I had come back to that intense awareness, that's how the change happened. That's where the shift happened. Did that make sense, or was I rambling?
Well, I think that it's happening slightly differently for each of us. I mean, we're all working so closely with our guides, and the greater picture is something we can't see. For example, I was sort of writing The Fun of Dying. I thought I was just writing course materials for a course I was giving at a Unity church, and then I just kept writing and writing. But I didn't think it was any kind of hurry, and I realized suddenly I was writing a book. This is fun, but I didn't know I was channeling it, and I was very lazy about the whole thing. And all of a sudden, they speeded it up. I was suddenly feeling intense and desperate to get it done, and fortunately easily found a publisher, and the book was out. That, to me, in my mind, when I look back at it, that's an example of how they're trying to have us hit marks that they're still sort of figuring out as things go on. They can see alternative futures, but they can't see the future that will actually happen. And as things happen that are important to them, they'll rearrange our lives to fit what they know now is going to happen in various ways. So, and we have no idea about any of it because we can't see a blessed thing. But they know what they're doing, and the sense I get is that they know it's working.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here because I know I'm going to get emails about this. Doesn't that feel manipulative?
Yeah, in the best possible way. We have free will, and which is what causes the problem. Spiritual growth.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, well, that's why Jesus had to come to begin with. First, to figure out how we screwed up so badly, and then to figure out how to teach us how to fix it. And while we have free will, a lot of us choose to exercise that free will before our births, and we accept. I accepted a charge from Thomas. Didn't have to. I could have said, no, I'm not going to do that. But I accepted a charge as guides, gave up the option of becoming an axe murderer or making some wildly different choice. I realized over and over again, and I've lived the world's most boringly perfect life. You cannot imagine. I've never done a blessed thing wrong. I didn't even inhale. So, and I didn't know why that was important until nowish. Because if I'm going to teach, had a series of affairs, or I couldn't have robbed a bank. I couldn't have. You know what I mean? It's just. I was not the same person before I began to do the teaching seriously as I am now, but I never was awful. And that's something I gave up the option of. I gave it up before I was born, and I'm the one who gave it up. There are other people who have not given anything up because what their particular mission is to try to use their free will to grow as rapidly as possible, because theoretically anyway, there's more growth to come from having many options and choosing the right ones than to be in my situation where I really am not, I don't even seriously consider doing things which are anywhere off my path. I've given my life. Finally, Thomas chose to have me give my life to God, which I did in April of 2009, and I think that was so I would be ready to do the rest of this stuff. But that's something which I urge people to do, but very few people will do it because it sounds scary. Because you can't take your life back once you give it to God. It's kind of irrevocably out of your hands. But it was already out of my hands anyway. I now realize that. It just made me focus and become more serious.
Well, didn't our lives originally belong to God anyway?
Yes. And we are still part of God. There is no time in eternity, and we never leave God. We are like Jake in the movie Avatar. This body we think we're in is his blue avatar, and we are able to operate it and learn from it and so on, but we are safe in the mind of God even now. There's nothing that can harm you. What's the worst that can happen? Your avatar will become unusable and you go home. That's not a bad thing at all, because home is way, way much more fun than this. It's just that we're here to do something we crave, which is to grow spiritually. Every craving you've ever had in your life for food or sex or money or anything, all wrapped up into one and maybe multiplied by hundreds of times. That's the craving you'll feel when you're back home for growth spiritually. You will hunger for it. And
let me ask you this, and here's one of my questions that might get me kicked out of church again.
It's fine. We're kicked out together.
If we were already in this wonderful place, what possessed us to decide to come down here and do all this crazy stuff we do?
Because spiritual growth is a process. Now, my question is, why aren't we already perfect if we're already part of God? We seem to have given up that. Yeah. We seem to have given up that perfection. A Course in Miracles explains it this way. There was into the mind of the Son of God came a tiny mad idea, which the Son of God forgot to laugh. And that idea was separation, that we even could be separated. And immediately, because we're talking the mind of God, we're part of the mind of God, we're powerful, immediately there was the separation. Whoosh! We'd be out. That's the Big Bang, kind of. Immediately, because it's infinitely brilliant and powerful, mind is working out matter, energy, time, space, this whole illusion. And we think we're in it, but we're not. Because the next thing that happened after that was that because it was such a stupid idea, God immediately ended it. But because it all happened at all, and one of the things created in it, in that process was time, or the illusion of time, it goes on. And the rescue process goes on. We are being rescued back out of that and to the reality, which is God's perfect love. The process involves repeated lives on earth. And again, this is from A Course in Miracles. I don't know if it's the best explanation I've ever seen. I don't know if it's right. But we start out believing that we are not part of God. We quickly begin to understand that this is a you know how you can be competitive because you want the big corner office? Well, there are big corner offices, and we want them like you cannot imagine. But the only way to get to them is to grow spiritually. And you can't grow spiritually there. I think of this not so much as a school, but more like a gym. You know, we one lifetime is a sort of an awful afternoon in the gym, and all the things that happen to us are there to stretch our spiritual muscles and strengthen them. So, you know, lousy husband, loss of a child, loss of a job, you know, awful mother-in-law, whatever is making your life miserable, you chose that as a machine to strengthen your spiritual muscles. And when if you do a really good job with this sort of growth system you've set out for yourself, when you return, you'll be at a much higher level spiritually, and it's much more fun. The higher you go, the more fun it is. There are so many people who have told us some variant of this story that I'm certain it's true. I don't know why, but that's what's going on, and that's why we keep coming back, because until you reach a pretty high level in the afterlife, this is the only way you can grow. After a while, you are developed enough that you're able to help others, both there and here. Thomas is my spirit guide because he's trying to help the world. And so is your spirit guide, and everybody's spirit guide is doing some good, and that's a way to develop spiritually. But we need those machines.
That was a really good explanation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really am sad to say that our hour is drawing to its close.
Oh, no.
And we're going to have to stop. This is a fascinating topic. I encourage everybody to get the book and read it. It's called Liberating Jesus. The author is Roberta Grimes, and I know it's on the bookshelves everywhere. Her other books, Fun of Dying and Find Out What Really Happens Next, The Fun of Staying in Touch, they're wonderful, too. I've read both of them as well. And you won't be sorry you got them. Thank you, Roberta, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Please don't hang up. I want to talk to you after I wrap. But I want to take just a minute to ask you if you have one salient point from the broadcast tonight that you want everybody to take away with them.
Yes, you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end, and you're infinitely loved. That's where you start. That's your basis, and you can build gloriously from there. The teachings of Jesus are a perfect way to do that. And
That's
my website is
robertagrimes.com.
robertagrimes.com, and I do answer emails. So if you have questions, just send them through the website.
I will also have her contact information posted with the show so that in case you forget or something comes up and you need to get hold of her later, you can. So you'll have all of that underneath the write-up of the show. I want to thank all of you for joining us for the show tonight. If you'd like to send in a question or a suggestion for a topic that you'd like covered on the show, please send your question, your suggestion, or request to me at EOS4 and the word me at ymail.com. Again, that's the letter E, the letter O, the letter S, the number 4, and the word me at ymail.com. My website's still up and running, so if you want to contact me through there, you can go to Chessie at chessieroberts.com, and all of my classes and everything are there. My music that you hear at the beginning and the end of the show is at archersmeadow.com, and my book, Evolving into Self, From the Puppet to the Master, My Evolution from the Cradle to the Grid, is on Amazon.com, and it's my story about my awakening and how, if I can do it, you can do it too. So thank you for listening. Please come back anytime to hear Get on the Grid with Chessie Roberts. Have a great week. Bright blessings. Bye-bye.